Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Show here on my YouTube channel. My name is John Campea. I, of course, will be your host today, and I'm so glad you guys decided to join me to talk about all of our favorite things in the world, movies and television, all that kind of good stuff. And get ready, all of you film fans, to burn with jealousy. Like what I'm about to tell you, you're going to sit there in your computer and you're going to utter the phrase, "I wish I had John Campea's life." Are you ready? Are you ready? I'm going to go see 50 Shades Freed tonight. Now stay in your seats. I know now you're cursing the gods in the heavens that you can't be me. I know. But just try to reel it in. Understand that soon enough you'll get to see 50 Shades Free as well. And, I mean, look, who knows, right? I hated the first, what was it called? Rush Hour. I hated the first Rush Hour movie. Maybe I didn't hate it, but I did not like it. And I ended up loving the second one. I love Rush Hour 2. Absolutely love it. Didn't like the second one. I have not been a fan of the 50 Shades movies up till now. Who knows? Look, this is the thing. We can all predict movies will be good or bad. Sure. But then when you go to the movie, you got to take those expectations, leave them at the door, and just go in and take the movie for what it is. Leave all your expectations at the door, and who knows, maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe I'll come out here tomorrow and go, guys, 50 Shades, not so bad. It can happen. I'm not expecting that. The last two have been terrible dumpster fires of movies, but maybe. So yeah, it's all you burn with jealousy that I get to go see 50 Shades Freed tonight. Anyway, okay guys, let's get moving here. Here's how today's show is going to go. I have picked out 4 topics that you guys have emailed into me. How do you email in a topic to me? It's real simple. You just email me, john@thejohncampeashow.com. Put that word topic in the subject line. And of course, guys, keep your emails to 90 words or less. The shorter, the better. And then after I'm through these 4 main topics, we'll go on to take some of your live comments and questions. Of course, you can use Super Chat for that. It gets your question on the show, and it's a great way to support the channel. I thank you for all you guys who do use that. All right, with that out of the way, let's move on to question number 1. And question number 1 today comes to us from Ray. And Ray writes, where'd it go? Hey, John, love the show and huge fan. Thank you so much, Ray. My question is, do you think as each year goes by that the Oscars are becoming less relevant? In the USA alone, 38 million people watch the Oscars, yet 246 million people went to the cinema. That means only about 15% care about the Oscars. Okay, fair enough question, Ray, but you got to put that number in context, right? So only this many people watch the Oscars. Okay, you gave the 38 million number. Let's put this into context. How many people do you think watched Game 7 of the World Series in 2017? How many people do you think watched Game 7 of the World Series? Like America's pastime, not as big as football, obviously, but one of the biggest sports in the world. Game 7, as nail-biter drama as you get it, blah, 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 blah. How many people do you think watched it? 27 million people. And that's that's bigger than any television show. That's much bigger than any television show. The Oscars, 38 million. The only television broadcasts in 2017 that had more viewers than the Oscars were the NFL championship games. That's it. No other broadcast got close to the numbers of people who watched the Oscars. Now, you could say, you know, how many people watch the NFL, and then they have the NFL Player of the Year awards, and only like less than 1% of the people actually watch them. Does that mean the NFL Player Awards are not relevant? Of course they're relevant. They're very relevant. And a lot of people watch them, just not in relation to the overall number of people who watch football. So, no, the Oscars are not becoming less relevant. If anything, with all the amount of social media attention that the Oscar nominations got this year, there's more interest than ever. That doesn't mean people are going to tune in and watch the actual broadcast of the show, although it will still be the biggest broadcast of the year aside from the NFL championship games, obviously. It's still going to be the #1 broadcast of the year. But But yeah, I mean, the Oscars are very relevant. The social media engagement over the nominations this year were bigger than this ever in history of social media engagement. Granted, social media engagement has only been really traced for the last 5 years, but still. So no, the Oscars are very, very relevant, and a hell of a lot of people watch it. So if you're thinking the Oscars aren't that relevant, then you have to say that anything that gets broadcast is not relevant, because nothing other than NFL championship games gets as many viewers as the Oscars. So, and this year may be a down. Look, we're seeing right now there's a downward trend. Award shows are getting the lowest numbers they've had in a long time. So maybe we'll get a lowest number in a long time for the Oscars. That's fine, but it's still going to be the most viewed broadcast other than NFL championship games this year. So that's just kind of how I see it. That's when you put it into context a little bit. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Luis de la Peña, who writes, I've followed all of your work since late 2014. Thank you so much, Luis. I appreciate that. On to my question. Could Netflix buying the Cloverfield Paradox movie be the first symptom of production companies selling their mid to high budget films that they don't trust that will do well in theaters? Thanks for taking my question, and keep bringing on the filthy. Well, I've been getting a bunch of questions ever since Sunday when Cloverfield Paradox dropped. I've gotten a bunch of questions that were basically along this vein. Is Netflix going to become a dumping ground for studios that put their films together and realize this movie isn't so good? We don't think this is going to do well. In the past, they still had to then, if they wanted to try to recoup some of their investment, they still just had to put it into theaters. But now, there's another option. Netflix. So Paramount's got this movie, Cloverfield Paradox, and they look at it and they realize, actually this movie did not turn out as well as we hoped it would. And I don't think as many people are going to come to see this as we think that there will be, and we don't think there's going to be very positive word of mouth. 5 years ago, it didn't matter. You had to recoup some of your investment, get it into theaters. But today, there's another option. Netflix. Go dump it on Netflix. And look, and Netflix had some success with it. So could this become a pattern? Look, one of the, when I was putting together my list of my most anticipated films of 2018, I did not put The Irishman on it, which is, of course, the Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, tons of other people. Anyway, and people were really befuddled. John, why didn't you put The Irishman on there? And I said, because this is a movie they shopped to studios and they all turned it down. And it ended up at Netflix. That is a red flag to me. Now, maybe it's still Scorsese, for heaven's sakes. Maybe that movie's going to end up being brilliant, and I cannot wait to at least check it out to see how it turns out, but I am a bit pessimistic about it because of the circumstances of how it landed at Netflix. And now we see a movie like Cloverfield Paradox. That is, this is a subpar movie that probably wasn't getting any attention, so it landed at Netflix. This could become a pattern. This could become a new option for studios that don't believe in their films and think, we can at least recoup something without putting into theaters. We can drop it on Netflix. Or maybe we can drop it on iTunes. Or maybe we can drop it on Amazon Prime. Or maybe we can drop it on Google Play. Something along those lines. But Netflix seems to be a buyer. So we'll see. I mean, look, I've been saying for a while, I love the television that Netflix has been creating. I have been underwhelmed, to say the least, at the original motion pictures. I'm sorry, and I know some people got a big kick out of it, but Bright wasn't all that good. It certainly had potential, and I'm interested in seeing a sequel, but really it's not all that well put together of a film. But it found a home on Netflix, did what it did Netflix. There have been some exceptions, like Beast of No Nation, right? But for every Beast of No Nation, there's 4 or 5. What was that last one they just put out with the Killer Babysitter? Killer Babysitter, or The Babysitter. Netflix did a big push on it. It's just terrible. It was just terrible. So Netflix is an interesting dichotomy of things right now. It's like their television stuff is just amazing. Not all of it, but most of it is just amazing. But their motion picture, whether it's their originally produced or stuff they've gone out and acquired, has been a questioning. A lot of people are asking, is Netflix just going to become a dumping ground? Maybe it will. Or maybe Netflix will change philosophies and directions as to what they're going to acquire and buy. We'll have to see as time moves on. But it is something to keep an eye on. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Martin Bridgewater. And Martin Bridgewater writes, with the announcement that Benioff and Weiss are doing a series of Star Wars films, by the way, guys, Benioff and Weiss are the creators of the Game of Thrones television series, I heard you mention that it could mean Star Wars goes to 2 films per year. But what if the new films are made for the streaming service? Is it possible that these new films are going to be a series on the new Disney streaming service? All right, thanks a lot for the question, Martin. And for those of you who maybe, you were busy yesterday and you didn't hear, the big news, of course, yesterday was the 2 guys who are responsible for creating the Game of Thrones television series, Weiss and Benioff. They have just signed with Lucasfilm to develop what Lucasfilm calls a new series of films separate from the saga films and separate from the Rian Johnson Star Wars films that he's developing. So the Game of Thrones guys are going to be making Star Wars content now, as they're going to be overseeing them as writers and producers of the new content, which it's just great news. You know one of my sayings, right? It's never a mistake to add talent. These guys are clearly talent. And I heard some people online yesterday trying to downplay how big of a deal this is, saying, well, they're not the ones who created Game of Thrones. That's J.R.R. Martin. These guys did nothing. Okay, look, clearly you don't understand the incredibly difficult process of taking something from a printed page and actually putting it on the screen. Because there are tons of great books that turned into crappy films or TV series. You've got to be able to have that talent to take something that's on a page, that's great, but to actually manifest it now onto the screen and make it work, that's a whole nother thing. That doesn't downplay what George R.R. did with his books, not at all. But it's a totally different beast doing that. And I would actually argue that this past season of Game of Thrones was probably my favorite season, and they went beyond the books. So let's just tuck away this whole thing. Oh, it's not them, it's J.R.R. Martin. Well, J.R.R. Martin, sorry. It's George R.R. Martin. Why? I'm thinking J.R.R. Tolkien. That's why. Okay, so it's George. Oh, that's just all George R.R. Martin. No, it's not. He created the story. Great, fantastic books. But if it was just that easy to translate it, then every good book would have a fantastic TV show or a fantastic movie. And you and I both know that's not the case. It takes very special, talented people to be able to do that. And they proved that by going beyond what was in the books and making what, in my opinion at least, and I'm not the most knowledgeable of Game of Thrones people, but in my opinion, the best episode, the best season of Game of Thrones yet. So I'm really stoked about these guys coming on. Now, one of the conversations that's started to peak up, and I mentioned this on Star Wars Talk Tuesday yesterday, was that I think there is if I had to set an over-under number on this, I would set it at 28%. Over-under that these new projects that the Game of Thrones creators are working on for Star Wars are actually destined to be on the streaming service rather than theaters. I will set the over-under on that at 28%, which means I still think the odds are that these are going to be theatrically released films. But I do believe there's a chance that Disney's whole philosophy here might be just to make a huge splash with their streaming service. And that is certainly a possibility. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think the content that these guys are going to be creating is ultimately for the more traditional, large, wide-release theatrical film, which is where they can make their most money? Or do you think this is going to be their silver bullet to be their exclusive Disney streaming service, brand new Star Wars projects from the guys who brought you Game of Thrones? That would be a pretty significant silver bullet in the chamber, don't you think? So I'm going to set that at 28%. What are your best arguments for why it is destined for the screen? What's your best argument for why it might be destined for the streaming service? I want to know what you guys think about that. All right, let's jump on now to the final emailed in question today. And the final emailed in question today comes to us from Thomas Patterson, who writes, after the praise that has been given to Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger in Black Panther, I started thinking about the other Phase 3 villains. While Doctor Strange's and Civil War villains were weak, Vulture and to a lesser extent Hela and Ego, who were more serviceable than antagonists, I felt were much better than them and past villains. Do you think Marvel might finally be making better villains? All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And look, even somebody like me, who is a big fan of Marvel films, even somebody like me has had the long lament that, hey, one of the things no series of films can do everything right. And one of the things that I believe that Marvel has struggled at has been their villains. And that's been okay because the films have still been great. And Kevin Feige very clearly years ago laid out his philosophy that their movies are about their heroes. Captain America is about Captain America. Iron Man's about Iron Man. Thor is about Thor. And Feige seemed to express that he's got this philosophy that we want our movies to be about our heroes, and the villains are there to push the heroes along the hero's journey, not to be the focus of attention. Fair enough. And it is a calculation that has worked for Marvel films. There's no denying that. It is a calculation that has clearly worked for Marvel films up until this point. But recently, it seems like they've had a slight shift in philosophy, that they've been more recently saying, let's give a little bit more depth to our villains. Let's give a little bit more emotional hooks to our villains. Maybe let's even make our villains a little bit more relatable. Emotionally relatable, at any rate. And I think we're seeing Marvel, and I put this in the title of the video, but really stepping up its villain game lately. Now, don't get me wrong. Marvel still hasn't given us a villain as great as Heath Ledger's Joker, by any stretch of the imagination. But, starting with Captain America Civil War. Now, I thought Zemo was a bad villain. I did. I still believe that. I believe he was ultimately, he was pretty fundamentally unimportant to the movie. Because a lot of things that he put in motion, it looks like we're going to be put into motion by natural events anyway. So, they've had several plot holes involving Zemo that I just didn't buy in. But you could see with Zemo, even though Zemo didn't work for me, you could see that Marvel was putting new detail and new attention to the villain, giving him an emotional connection to the audience. Because it was kind of heartbreaking when you realize that message from his wife that he's been listening to is actually a saved one of his dead wife that was killed by the actions of the Avengers. Granted, they were heroic actions by the Avengers trying to save everybody, but still, and on that level, I remember us thinking as an audience, your heart just broke for him a little bit, right? So even though I didn't think it worked, you could see in there that Marvel was kind of taking a slightly different shift in how they looked at their villains. Well, then we get Michael Keaton as Vulture, who was a damn great surprise to me because, again, this is a guy who is who has been wronged by the government. He was an honest man just trying to do honest work, and he was constantly getting screwed over. And finally, I'm going to take care of my wife, and I'm going to take care of my kid. I'm going to do whatever by any means I need to do it. And, he wasn't some master. He wasn't going out specifically, I'm evil, I'm going to go out and kill everybody. That wasn't his motivation. And I still think one of my favorite scenes of any movie in 2017 is that scene when Peter shows up to pick up his prom date and opens the door and you realize Michael Keaton is the girl's father. And you're like, oh, I remember being in the theater when that scene happened. And you could feel the air being sucked out of the theater because everybody gasped at the same time. Like, it was a great moment. Just a wonderful moment. But anyway, we saw with Spider-Man Home, technically it is a Sony film, but Marvel was the production company behind it. You could see that they were putting a lot more emphasis comparatively to their old films. Maybe not comparatively to some others, but compared to other Marvel films, they were putting a lot more emphasis on their villain, giving more emotional depth to the villain, getting us a little bit more attached to the villain so we could understand their motivations. Well, we move on from there, and I thought they did a really good job with Hela. Hela, who was a more traditional, I'm bad because I'm bad, right? That whole thing. But then you realize where her angst came from. Of course, played by one of the greatest actresses of all time in Cate Blanchett. She brings that depth to it. She was incredibly powerful. The great back and forth between her, Loki, and Thor, I thought worked great. So again, not quite as good as the Michael Keaton Vulture villain, but you could see they're following through on this change of philosophy. And now we come to Black Panther. And I know most of you haven't had a chance. Some of you, I think, probably have had a chance to see it by now. I'm sure most of you haven't, though. But you're hearing about it. Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger is terrific. Just terrific. And I want to be very, very careful not to get into any spoilers here. So I'm not. But that path we saw Marvel starting down with Zemo, giving more emotional hook to our villain, getting the audience more emotionally connected to the point where we could go, oh, wow, I can kind of see where he's coming from, even though he's still the bad guy. the follow through on that, and I think you can see them getting better at it, because Killmonger is actually a great villain. And used probably as well. It's my favorite Marvel villain since Loki. I think Loki is still the guy I prefer, but Killmonger is just a terrific villain. And now, you know, when I've been reviewing Marvel films, when they have had a really good villain, and I didn't like Ego. I didn't think Ego was could have been a great villain. I didn't think he worked out very well, but that's just my opinion. It's getting to the point now that when I see a Marvel movie, like, it's just become old hat that you talk about the things you like, and then whenever I get to the things I don't like, and talk about things we don't like, once again, Marvel traditionally doesn't put much attention to its villain, so the villain was a weak part of the film. And then when we'd have a good one, I'd be kind of surprised, like, hey, like, this Michael Keaton Vulture was really good. Unlike traditional Marvel movies, the villain was good. Maybe I can't say that anymore now, because we've had a couple of decent to great villains in a row. Hela, pretty decent. Michael Keaton, really good. Killmonger, great. We've had a couple in a row of decent to great villains in the Marvel films, and it really seems like Marvel, the MCU at this point, is stepping up their villain game. And if they continue to do that, great. I don't know much about what's going on. I don't know how well they'll use Thanos. I don't know who they've got lined up to be the villain. Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know who they've got lined up to be the villain in Ant-Man. And maybe they'll drop the ball with Thanos. Maybe they'll once again make just an insignificant throwaway character the villain, just to push the hero story along, and they go right back to their old patterns. And that's fine if the movie still works, great. But right now, it really seems to me like Marvel's on a bit of a roll. And they're doing good things with their villains right now, which is not something I expected to see. And it's a really good thing to see. Okay, listen, guys, before we go on to the live questions, I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention, about 45 minutes before we started the show today, a new Deadpool 2 trailer dropped. I'm sure all of you guys have seen it now. In maybe like 2 hours from now, I'm going to drop my full breakdown, kind of the way like I did my breakdown for the Solo trailers. I'm going to do a full breakdown of the Deadpool 2 trailer, but I thought I should at least mention it here. It's great. It's a great trailer. Two of my favorite lines in the trailer are, "Reach for the sky." I'm sure most of you guys instantly got the Toy Story reference, even before the cable doll said, "Oh no, it's Sheriff Deadpool." I mean, I'm sure most of you guys got the reference. I was laughing. I was sitting in the gym watching it on my phone, and I'm laughing out loud, and people had no idea what I was laughing at. But obviously, the best line of this trailer, and you guys all know what it is. It's like, it's not like we gotta remove a mustache. I can't believe Ryan went there. I can't believe Reynolds went there with that, which was great. And it reminds me so much of that. We're going to take you to see the professor. Which one, Stewart or McAvoy? This whole multi-timeline thing gets all mixed up. Like, that was one of the best lines of the original. It's too bad that this line, it's not like you got to remove a mustache, isn't going to be in the movie. It's just in the trailer, but still, I thought that line was great. Thought the trailer looked great. I'm so glad Blind Al is in the trailer. That might have been the next funniest moment of the trailer, when they both hold up their guns at the same time, but Blind Al's got her gun going this way. Deadpool grabs her arm, does this. I love Blind Al. I thought she was some of the best. Like, her moment in the first Deadpool, I'm probably going on too long about this, but her moment in the first Deadpool was one of the funniest ones. Ta-da. Love that moment in the movie. It's so good. So, yeah, those are my favorite moments of the Deadpool 2 trailer. I thought it looked spectacular. If you haven't seen it and didn't know it dropped, now you're aware it dropped. Do a quick search on YouTube, Deadpool 2, trailer number 2. You'll find it. It's great. Anyway, yeah, but a little bit later. So I'm not going to go more into it right now because I want to watch it about 10, 15, 20 more times. And then I'm going to do a full breakdown video of it a little bit later today. So keep your eyes open for that. Okay, with that out of the way, we're going to move into the live questions. But before we do, I want to take my 1-minute commercial break where I do my fully admit that this is a shameless plug. I admit it, it is. But it is for the thing that keeps the lights on around here, which is my Patreon campaign. So check this out. I'll be back in 1 minute. For those of you who have followed me for any period of time, you guys know that I made the decision recently to leave the corporate overlords. I no longer wanted to work for corporations. I wanted to be an independent content creator. And the only way I've been able to do that is by the support of my Patreon supporters. So what I would like to do is to ask you guys who watch my shows, who spend any amount of time with me every single month, to consider going over to www.patreon.com/John Campea. There you'll get all the information about what exactly does it mean to be a Patreon supporter of mine? What does being a Patreon supporter do for helping to make sure that shows like this one and all the other shows I do here on my channel can actually be produced? And on top of that, what benefits are there to being a Patreon supporter? And maybe if you guys can check that out, if you decide you want to be one of my Patreon supporters, that would be awesome. And if you don't, that's perfectly fine too. I'm just happy that you guys have decided to be here today and be a fellow movie fan and join us in the conversation. So go and check out the website, see if you want to become a Patreon supporter. And now let's get back. All right, guys, and a special thank you to all of you who are already Patreon supporters. Thank you so much. You guys are the reason these shows are even able to happen. All right, with that out of the way, let's get on to your live comments and questions. We got about 10 or 15 minutes here. By the way, guys, if you have not sent in a question yet, please no more. If you have not sent in a question on Super Chat yet, please no more. I've got all of them that I can handle right now. So the last one I'm going to take is Ran Entertainment's down there that came in at 823. So that's the last one I'm going to take. All right, with that, let's move on with it. And the first question comes today from Adam Griffin, who writes, any chance of completing your Runaways review? Well, I mean, my Runaways review was really just meant to be for my first impression of the show. And they dropped, I believe it was 3 episodes. They dropped it once, so I watched the first 3 episodes, did a review of that. I decided not to do an episode by episode thing, so probably not. I mean, especially since the season ended a month ago. So there's really no point in me putting up a full season review of it yet. Or I mean, at this point. So no, probably not going to go back to that. And I did complete, I just want to do it much like Black Lightning. I did a review of the first episode because I want to give my first impressions and thoughts about where this show's going. I haven't done Black Lightning reviews for every episode. I'm probably not going to do that. I found that when I do episode by episode by episode reviews, not many people watch them. But like first episode reviews, people seem to be more interested in that just so we can get a sense of where the show's going. So probably won't be doing any more Runaways reviews, even though I love the show. Love the show. Really, really do. Ben Rayner writes, did you see the new Deadpool 2 trailer? Did you hear the diss at DC? Well, that wasn't a diss at DC because they threw snarky little comments at their own X-Universe films and Marvel films in their marketing and in the movies and stuff like that too. I wouldn't call it a diss. It's just playing, it's just having fun. I did not take it as a diss against DC because really there was nothing they could... Remember, DC was in a very difficult situation. Henry Cavill was under contract to Paramount for his role in Mission Impossible. Paramount said he can't shave his mustache. There's nothing DC could do about it. So it wasn't really DC's fault. They just did the best they could with the situation in their hands. So it's not really their fault. So, no, Ben, I didn't see it as a diss, but I did think it was really funny. It was my funniest part of that trailer, I thought. Andy A. Hernandez writes, have you seen the show The Big Bang Theory? My favorite shows, and I'll be a Patreon supporter soon. Well, Andy, I hope you will still be a Patreon supporter after I mentioned I don't like The Big Bang Theory. I've tried to watch a few episodes of it. I just don't find it funny. My own personal impression of it, and this is just my impression. You may have a totally different impression, which is totally fine. My impression is it's a show written by a bunch of guys who don't really know geek culture, writing a show about guys who are completely about and understand geek culture. And that's just always the impression I got. And I didn't find it funny. And it's funny because a couple of my best friends love that show. Like, love that show. And have even got to go be in the studio audience once for the show and just love the show. And I've tried and I just could not get into it. And but that's just me. I know there's a lot of you guys out there who love that show, and that's awesome. I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. That's great if it works for you. I wish it worked for me, but it just didn't work for me. Ben Rayner writes, how long will Black Panther hold 100% on Rotten Tomatoes? It's difficult to say because right now, the last time I checked, there was only about 65 reviews counted, and there's probably going to end up being around 200 reviews counted. Film being subjective, somebody's going to not like it. But it's really the kind of movie that I don't know if you're going to like the film, and I don't know if you're going to think it's the greatest thing ever. but I do think you'll at least like it. It's just the type of movie that there's not a lot in it to dislike. So it may not end up being in your top 10 favorite movies of the year, but I really do think you're going to like this movie. I think you're going to like this movie. So give it a shot when you have a chance. How long will it hold the 100%? I don't know. It could hold. Honestly, it could hold. It's just one of those movies that I just didn't see a lot to dislike in. Odds of averages says it'll probably have a couple of people that not like it, because that's how film is. Film is subjective. Not necessarily everybody will like it, but hey, Paddington 2 held on to its 100% for the same reason. There's nothing in Paddington 2 to dislike. And so everybody liked it. That doesn't mean everybody thinks it's a perfect film. It just means everybody liked it. And I think Black Panther could be one of those films as well. Parzival writes, hey, John, du are Kungen. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to take it as a compliment. I'm going to think it means you are handsome. Did you see the official Shazam plot synopsis? And The Rock is one of the film's executive producers. What does that mean? I did see the plot synopsis. It's exactly what we were expecting. They're going to play up the comedy of a little kid in the body of a grown-ass man with superpowers. And what would that kid do? And that's a really good premise, to be honest. I still think they should be rebooting the DCEU, but let's give credit where it's due. I think that's a good premise for something like Shazam. The Rock being executive producer means nothing. It absolutely means nothing. It probably just means they gave him a credit for all the back and forth. Because remember, he was supposed to be in the Shazam movie. Now he's not. They probably give him a credit, something like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I really don't think that The Rock being listed as a executive producer means anything to the film, to be 100% honest with you. Van Rock Carmore writes, what happened to the Rihanna/Lupita Nyong'o heist film? Yeah, I remember a while ago, and oh, damn it, the director of Selma. I believe the director of Selma was supposed to be the director of that, and it was Rihanna, Lupita Nyong'o. What happened to it? The same thing that it might still be in development. I don't know, but what probably happened to it is the same thing that happens to 98% of all films that get started, which it means it never gets past the concept stage. You know, you can say, I've got an idea for a movie. Great. And somebody will say, okay, I want to buy rights to it. Great. And then you get some people attached to it. Great. And you start developing, but then it never goes anywhere beyond that. And that's what happens to 98% of movies or movie concepts. Like, I remember I used to go into some studios. I used to have a pretty decent relationship with Lakeshore, which was the studio behind the Crank films and a few other films. And really good people at Lakeshore. And I remember I used to go into one of the executives' offices, and he's an executive, but just in his office is just stacked floor to ceiling all over the place scripts. Scripts. Had to be like 200 scripts piled in that guy's thing. And I remember talking to him and said, yeah, probably one of these we'll actually make. But it was his job just to read them all. First of all, he had assistants that would do initial reads, and they would only pass on things to him that they thought were okay, and then he would go through them, and like, so if there were like 200 in his office that did get passed on to him, that means there were probably 800 others that didn't get passed on to him, and that was just for that month. So it's a tricky thing. Most of these films never get made. Most of the ideas of films and a script, like people think, oh, we heard a script got written for this. That means it's going to happen. No, not necessarily, and this Lupita Nyong'o Rihanna heist film is a really great example of that. And who knows? Maybe it still could happen. I just wouldn't put any money on it right now. Ben Rayner writes, surprised that TJ Miller was in the trailer? No, I wasn't surprised. Look, when the whole thing came out again about what happened with him in university, and apparently they had settled it, I thought there was a chance that maybe they'd remove him out of the film. But I didn't know how much of the film he was in. If he was in just a little bit, maybe they'll remove him from the film. If he was in a lot of it, then that's a lot more complicated to take him out. They made the decision to leave him in the film. Fine, that's their call. And I'm a big fan of TJ Miller as a performer. I don't know him personally. I don't know if he's a giant dick. I don't know if he's the greatest guy in the world. I don't know if the allegations from him from college were true or not. I just know what I read. I don't know any of that, so I leave that up to the studio to decide what they want to do with him, because I simply don't know. But once they made the decision that he was staying in the film, then no, then I'm not surprised that they used him in the marketing, that they used him in the trailer. He wasn't in it a lot. I think it was just the one shot of him in the trailer. But I really wasn't surprised at that point. Once they decided to keep him, I don't see why we wouldn't expect that they would use him in the marketing. All right, Luis Francisco writes, "Hey John, who chooses how a trailer is? The director of the movie, or how does studios decide what they put in the trailers? Keep up the great work." Well, I mean, it's a long answer to give, but basically this: 99% of the time, the director has no hand in the trailer. Maybe 95% of the time, the director has no say in the trailer. I have friends who are Hollywood directors, and often it's like, "What do you think of that trailer? Because we just saw it for the first time." And like, they're the directors of the film, right? 95% of the time, the directors have no say over a trailer. They are not marketing experts. Directors are not marketing experts. And what was it, Soderbergh, who did Logan Lucky? And I think he did have control over the marketing. And that's one of the reasons nobody went to go see it. And too bad, because Logan Lucky was a really solid movie. I liked it a lot. The one with Channing Tatum and Kylo Ren. Why am I forgetting the actor? My brain freezing on Kylo Ren's name. Anyway, it was a really good movie. Bad marketing campaign because directors are not marketing experts. What happens most of the time is that there are a bunch of boutique shops in Los Angeles. That's all their company does, is make trailers. They're experts at making trailers. And more times than not, the studios contract out to one of those companies. They provide them all the footage. The studio heads will tell them what they can and cannot put in there, and then they'll just go ahead and do it. So that's normally, there are exceptions to that, but that's the normal flow of things. Stig 100 900 writes, "Do you think Forrest Gump beat Shawshank because at the time it was more successful and popular, while Shawshank became a classic later on in life?" No. One of the things that the Academy has never cared about is how successful or popular a film is. As a matter of fact, the Oscars have often been criticizing for not taking into consideration how popular a film is. They've often been criticized by that. That's why you've had some years, over 20 years, where like all the nominees for Best Picture, nobody's ever seen. So no, I think it's really safe to say that the popularity, one movie being popular, that doesn't sway the Oscars at all. Like, not in the least. Never has. As a matter of fact, they've been criticized for the opposite of that. They've often been criticized for not taking popularity into consideration. So, no, I don't think that had anything to do with it, to be honest with you, Stig. Stig also writes, "Was Claw a good villain in Black Panther?" I loved Andy Serkis in Black Panther. I don't want to say anything else, okay? I'm not going to say another thing until I put out my spoiler review. I'll just say I loved Andy Serkis in this movie. When you see it, you'll see why. Okay, Luis Francisco also writes, "Dice from Last Jedi are in the Solo trailer." Nice. Yeah, I don't know if that's just a little Easter egg. For those of you guys, I'm sure you saw the stills floating around that as Han is driving that speeder, they're like dice. I don't know if somebody photoshopped those in, but it looks legit that they're actually the dice hanging there. I think that's probably more of a photo Easter egg and not actually meant to be the dice. It's probably just a cute little Easter egg. Much like in, you know how in the Phantom Menace or, not the Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, when they get to Theed and they show the space station, the spaceport at Theed, if you really look closely, they have the Millennium Falcon landing. I don't think that's not canon that, oh, Han Solo happened to be there at the same time. No, it's just a little visual Easter egg. That's what I think that is. Who knows? Maybe we'll see Solo and realize, no, those are the dice. Who knows? But we'll see. Let's see. Gab Lactus writes, "Why are people so hard on Alden Ehrenreich as Solo, but so accepting as Donald Glover as Lando? Is it because he's not the lead? Did I just answer my own question?" I actually brought that up on Star Wars Talk Tuesday yesterday. It is funny that there are people, but look, there were going to be people not happy because there were a bunch of people out there who all they wanted to see was a Harrison Ford impersonation. That's what they wanted to see, which of course would not work for a long movie. That would just get really old really fast. But a lot of people just went into the trailer. I want to see my Han Solo. I want to see a Harrison Ford impersonator. That's what they wanted to see. And unless they got a Harrison Ford impersonation, they weren't going to be happy. Now, there were also a lot of other people who just saw the trailer. Didn't work for them. A whole hell of a lot of people saw the trailer and they loved it. But I did bring up this, like, you know, it's funny. Everybody's saying how great Donald Glover is. And I'm a big Donald Glover fan. You know I like Gambino. But it is funny to me. Everybody's saying, oh, Donald Glover is awesome as Lando. He didn't say a word in the trailer. But everybody's jumping up and down about it. Why? Because standing there like this in his fur coat, oh, he looks like Lando. That means it's going to be good. It's like, whatever. I also think Donald looks great, but just because looking like the character does not make the movie better. It doesn't. And we've seen that play out 1,000 times. All right, let's move on. Chad Van Syok writes, because visual effects are usually started before principal photography, does the poor quality of Steppenwolf and Justice League show how rushed the reshooting was? I mean, look, there could be 1,000 different explanations about why he looks the way he looks, and I simply don't know. Like, I've always said, if you just look at a still model of Steppenwolf, it looks pretty good. It was the animation of him that looked terrible. And like one of the best examples I gave about why I hated the animation on him, even though I liked the movie, was the fact that, you know, when I talk, you can see, look, my head's moving, my eyebrows moving, cheeks move, like different parts of like the ears will even move a touch, the hair will wave just a little bit as I'm talking, blah, blah, blah. There were a number of scenes in that movie when Steppenwolf talked was blah, 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 blah. It was like a still picture with a mouth moving. And it's like, and it just felt eerie and weird, and it just didn't work. I don't honestly know if that was because poor communication between the directors and the visual effects company. I don't know if that was because they simply ran out of time, which probably it is. We all heard the story that they wanted to move Justice League into 2018, but Kevin Tsujihara said, no, keep it in 2017 because I want to get my bonus. We've heard all those stories. So what the actual real answer is, I don't know, but there are certain possibilities for sure. Ali Hussein writes, what is your favorite opening in a movie? Mine is Deadpool and Fast and Furious 6. I'd have to think about that, Ali. I would really have to give a lot of thought to that. Certainly the opening to Die Hard 3, that just starts with quiet city street and an explosion, and boom, there it is. The movie starts. That was great. Certainly Deadpool was a great opening too, but I would have to sit down and actually think about that answer for a while. But those are some that come off the top of my head. Chris Warden writes, do you watch The Expanse on Sci-Fi Channel? I think it's great and love their world building. Some of the best sci-fi we've seen since Battlestar Galactica ended in 2009. I have not seen it. And, you know, sometimes there are shows that you guys will mention to me and I'll say, oh, wow, like I've had other friends tell me about it. I have heard The Expanse. I've never had any of my friends tell me to watch it. Not that I've had people tell me that it's bad. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying I've never had anybody recommend to me to watch it. I think you might be the first person to say I should check that out. So thank you, Chris, for putting that on my radar. Eli the Creative writes, knowing Jamie Chung playing Chi-Chi, how is her life after Dragon Ball Evolution? Do people still give her crap for that? Do you guys make fun of her for that? Yeah, so Jamie Chung, look, I don't want to give the impression that Ann and I hang out with Jamie all the time. That's not the case. Here's the background story. So Jamie Chung, who of course is in Dragon Ball, and right now she plays Blink in The Gifted. And she's doing amazing in that. And of course, she was in like The Hangover Part 3. She played Ed Helms' fiance in that. She's been in a number of things, including a bunch of smaller things that she's just been amazing in. Jamie's a terrific talent. And she was in Zack Snyder's film Sucker Punch. She was one of the 4 main girls in Sucker Punch. So anyway, Jamie, here's the interesting story. So I'm getting ready to go to the press junket for Sucker Punch. And part of that means I interview all the cast, right? So Anne comes to me and she goes, oh, you know, a girl I know is in that movie. I said, really? She goes, yeah, Jamie Chung. She's one of the 4 main girls. I said, oh, yeah, really? You know her? She goes, yeah, we were sorority sisters together when we were in university. I said, really? She goes, yeah, here's a matter of fact. Take this picture. And it was a group picture of the sorority sisters together. And in the picture was Anne and Jamie. And it's the first I'd ever heard of this. So I'm like, okay, cool. And then I say, hey, Ann, do you want to come to the junket? Because Ann had the day off that day. So do you want to come to the junket? I mean, you can't see anybody, but they always have a great buffet of food for everybody and just get to hang out there. And Ann said, sure, she had the day off. So Ann comes with me to this junket for Sucker Punch. So it comes time for me to go up and interview the cast, and I get around to interviewing Jamie Chung. And I'm in the room with Jamie Chung. This is how great Jamie is. And I said, hey, before we get started, I was told to give you this picture. And I give her the sorority sister picture. And Jamie's face just lights up. Just lights up. She goes, oh my God, where did you get this? And I point to Anne on the picture. I said, see that? She goes, yeah. I said, that's my wife. And she goes, you're married to Anne Ora? I'm like, yeah, I'm married to Anne Ora. She goes, oh my God, how is she? I said, she's doing great. I said, as a matter of fact, she's downstairs right now and blah, blah, blah. And Jamie said, Jamie was great. Jamie turns to the production person in the room, says, I need 5 minutes. And it was great. So Jamie halted the press junket. She got up, went downstairs to rush down and see Anne, and it was great. And then I've had Jamie on the show a number of times since then. I got to do some stuff with her at South by Southwest. She came into the studio, of course, for Big Hero 6 because she was one of the main voices in Big Hero 6. But like so whenever we bump into her, Anne social media messages her once in a while. Jamie's married now, all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to give the impression that it's like Anne and I hang out with Jamie Chung and her husband, once a month. That's not the case. Anne knows her, but it's not like we hang out in social circles together. So on that level, I wanted to point all that out to make it clear that I don't think, I wouldn't know if people make fun of her still for the Dragon Ball Z thing. I would assume that it's far enough away from her in her career now that she can probably take it in some fun. But yeah, I don't know. I honestly just don't know if people still make fun of her for that. But I think she's moved beyond because she's great. Jamie is a terrific actress. Steve, I got to fly through the last couple of these here, guys, because I'm out of time. Stephen Rowley writes, where did you Kylo Ren / Game of Thrones picture? That picture was just, I've looked for it on Google. I found it on Google. It was across a couple of Pinterest pages. But I don't know who the actor. Now, normally when I take some fan art and put it on, you'll notice in my show notes, I'll put a little asterisk and say fan art of whatever by whoever. But I actually couldn't find who did it because I was spread across several Pinterest pages. So I couldn't find who did it. So I don't know who did it, but I just found that picture online. Tank Mover writes, my wife got to FaceTime with Tom Kane Monday night for a Star Wars themed escape room she did at the local library. He was leaving for Hollywood to work on Solo this week. Bring on the filthy. What a great story, man. That's awesome. How did she... Oh, it was for an escape room. That's cool. Anne has actually really gotten into escape rooms lately. And we've gone to a couple. And then when we went to Canada, my family wanted to all go to do an escape room in Canada when we were there too. So it's funny. And they are fun. Escape rooms are pretty fun. If you haven't done it, check it out. Thank you for sharing that story, Tank. That's really cool. Let's see. Delaware Brat Boy writes, why do you think Marvel hasn't shown Ant-Man in any of the Infinity War promos? Maybe they're avoiding some sort of spoiler. Yeah. I think that's probably the best explanation for that. Because, we know he's in the movie. So I don't know. I really don't know. All I can think of is that there must be something significant in the movie and they're afraid of tipping their hand on that. Or maybe they want Ant-Man's reveal in the film to be something special. I'm not really sure. But until we know the answer, Delaware, we are all going to be asking, where is it? Now, I do expect we will probably see Ant-Man in an upcoming trailer. But if we don't, that's just going to heighten the mystery even more. So it's a great question. We just don't have any answers yet. Keith Franken writes, thoughts on the attacks yesterday on Kathleen Kennedy and Benioff Weiss over the Star Wars announcement? Well, I don't know what specific attacks you're talking about. Like yesterday was a pretty hectic day around here, so I wasn't following all the stuff. I'll certainly have to look up on it, but I did see some backlash, but it was minor. Things like Benioff and Weiss had nothing to do with the success of Game of Thrones. It's like, actually, yes, they did. You don't understand taking things from page to the screen if you would say that. So I don't know which specifics attack you're talking about, so I would have to keep an eye on that. But hey, it's toxic fandom. Everybody's going to attack something, no matter how good it is. Kick It to the King Productions writes, football question. How do you feel about the Colts getting duped? I'm a Titan fan, and I'm still laughing about it. Greatest thing to happen for AFC South. Yeah, so Josh McDaniels, offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, basically agrees to become the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts once the Super Bowl's done. But apparently then, the day they were supposed to have the press conference and announcements of the new coach, I guess the Patriots made a new deal with him and convinced him to stay. So he said, I don't think they were duped. I think it was an unfortunate circumstance for them. I think what it means is that Bill Belichick is probably retiring in a year or two. And the Patriots told Josh McDaniels, stick around and you'll be the next head coach of the New England Patriots. And that probably convinced him to stay. I'm just guessing. I don't know that for sure, but that's just my guess. Let's see. Aaron writes, why is nobody talking about Iron Man's suit in Super Bowl ad. I honestly didn't really notice any differences in it, so that's probably why. Maybe if I freeze framed, I'd know some differences, but you know me, guys like me, I don't really care all that much about the suit unless there's something dramatically functionally different that changes and alters our entire perception of it. I really don't care. I really don't care. So maybe I missed something, but I didn't notice anything in particular about the Superman suit, or about the Iron Man suit, to be honest with you, Aaron. Just Plain Steve writes, do you think Marvel Studios will ever take a shot at a movie centered on a villain, you know, because good is dumb? Again, I don't think so, because I don't think you can do it. The only movies we've ever seen where the villain was the main characters, they weren't really villains. Like, they can say all they want. Suicide Squad's about the bad guys, except that they all completely act like good guys. With some dark edges to them, but they all act honorably and hero and save the day. It is really difficult to make a movie truly about the villain because the audience can't get attached to it. That's why I think we haven't really seen it done yet. And why I think it's going to be interesting to see how Martin Scorsese can kind of shepherd this Joker thing if they actually do it. And then finally, Ran Entertainment writes, is Russell Crowe a good singer in Les Mis? I thought he was, but in honest trailers they say he isn't. I'd like to know your opinion. I thought he was good. But here's the problem. He was not nearly as good as Anne Hathaway was. And he wasn't nearly as good as Hugh Jackman was. So that's what he's being compared to. In a vacuum, I think we hear him sing Les Mis, and he's quite good. He's a good vocalist. I thought he did a very good job. But when you see him and you're comparing him to the job that Anne Hathaway did, and of course that won her an Oscar, and the job that Hugh Jackman did, who is a Broadway singer, and which got him an Academy Award nomination, then it doesn't compare so well. But in a vacuum, yeah, I thought he did a pretty good job. All right, guys, all the rest of the questions came in after I said don't send in any more questions. So here's what I'm going to do, guys. For those of you who still have questions pending, I will get to those questions first when I do open mic later today. Don't forget, open mic is later today. That's at 3 p.m. West Coast time. That's 6 p.m. East Coast time, where it's all just live questions, and it takes some of your video questions as well. So make sure you come back and join me for open mic at 3 o'clock. Again, in a couple hours, I'm going to have my full breakdown of the Deadpool 2 trailer. Make sure you come back for that as well. That will do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until my next video, bye-bye.